We just want the politicians to do their jobs. I don't want to do this. You don't want to be doing this. If you're in Labor, you should probably quit because that's a moral failing. Working from the inside's not working now. We don't have time. Speak up, run for the Greens or as an independent, or go and do something else with your life. For the future of our world, we don't have time for you to toe the party line if you don't believe in it. We used to have porches, we used to hang out the front, know our neighbours, keep an eye on the street. We've designed our community, we've designed our connection, and look where it's got us. And we must rebel against the loneliness and the isolation and the getting ahead. It's not a competition, it's collaboration, collaborating with the ocean, collaborating with the forests. It is our responsibility to protect it. We are caretakers for the next 7 generations.
G'day folks, welcome to What Can We Do, a podcast where I bring you conversations with the people who are working hard to make a difference in the world. We talk about the biggest issues we face today, what we can do to build something better, and how each of us can be part of the change. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording from today. I'd like to acknowledge the tens of thousands of years of culture, wisdom and connection to the land, sea and sky of some of the world's oldest ever storytellers. The land where we live, work and play here in Australia always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So my guest today on the podcast is the awesome Kate Hulett. Kate is someone who is bursting with passion for making a positive impact in the world. She ran as an independent candidate in Fremantle at both the federal and state elections last year in Western Australia, and came so close to winning with a margin of less than 1% both times. The cool thing about Kate, though, is she would never strike you as a politician. She's a photographer, she was a small business owner for 13 years in Freo, and she's just a cool, everyday person. If you follow her online, you'll see that she's involved in the campaign against Woodside in WA. She speaks a lot about politics, and she seems to be always doing something to make her community and the world a better place. We spoke about loads of different stuff, including why we need more normal people involved in politics, the importance of community, connection, and collaboration in a collapsing world, the gas industry in WA, and so much other stuff. It was great, so I hope you enjoy. Kate, thanks so much for joining me for a chat.
Well, thank you for coming over to Walyalup in Fremantle. It's nice to have you. We're excited to have East Coast people chatting to us in the West Coast. Sometimes we feel a bit forgotten, I think.
Oh, I don't think you should be. I feel like, most of what's going on, especially in the climate gas space, the showdown's all happening in WA at the moment.
So true. We every time I talk to anyone in the movement broadly, any kind of issue, it's like sometimes I feel like ideas come to die in WA, and we're so impactful on the whole country. Really, a lot of the time we are pulling, progress back from the rest of the country. And I actually think we need to have a lot more focus on the WA government and, what they're doing, because actually it's messing things up for so many Australians across the whole country. And so, yes, we are far away, but we are oversized in our negative influence.
Absolutely.
Politically.
It definitely seems like Roger Cook has way too much influence and power
No
over Albo, which we can get right into that. But first, how is life in the West, apart from battling Woodside and the gas industry?
That's such a big question. I adore where I live. I live in the centre of Walyalup, Fremantle, so we're on the mouth, the river mouth and the ocean, and we've got, incredible First Nations history here in Fremantle. We're also got gold rush kind of era architecture, and it's there's a layered history, and it's really creative and cultural, and it's got a real heartbeat, of interest and excitement here. Incredible opportunity, but we seem so hamstrung so frequently in all areas, by we get tangled up in bureaucracy, and so it's like we've got like cages on the flowers and they can't quite grow properly. And so on one hand, it's just like heaven, paradise. It feels like holidays. And on the other hand, you think, God, there's so many opportunities that we're missing. We could be incredible world leaders in so many areas, and so much innovation and culture and the arts and everything. And so it's a bit of a dichotomy of really full of gratitude and luck that we're here. And man, we could be really doing so much more for so many more people. I've got some really good friends who I work closely with, and so often we're like, oh, this place, but we only feel that passionate, oh, this place, because we love it so much, and like if we didn't care about it, we would be like, whatever, is what it
Yeah.
is. But because we know, it's like just teetering on the edge of like magnificence, it's even more frustrating, which makes us work even harder, to make change. That's a weird long question answer to a very simple question, isn't it?
That's great. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they say west is best, and I think
Mm,
that's definitely true. I wish it wasn't so far away from the East Coast, but maybe that's a
yeah.
good thing. Maybe that's why it's still probably a lot more pristine than over this way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like, the stuff happening that you can't see it, so we can just pretend
Yeah,
it's not happening, like
of
the
course.
all of the industry up in the Pilbara is so far away, it's hours flight. So a lot of the big corporations get away with a
Mm.
lot, even though
Hmm.
it's, directly affecting all of us. And I think, yeah, the remoteness can work really favorably for the big corporations, but they get a lot away with a lot of stuff,
Well, yeah,
which,
that's it, right? Like,
mm,
you've got Woodside wanting to drill at Scott Reef, and you've got fracking in the Kimberley on the table, which is just
mm,
insane to think about.
a
Like, if that
Texan company.
was, yeah, there you go. And if that was like the Great Barrier Reef or the Daintree Rainforest, or,
Totally.
I know there is a lot happening over here as well, but like, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. It does seem a bit forgotten because it's so far
Yeah.
away.
It was funny last year, at Leighton Beach, just like 15-minute drive from here, there was a whale and her calf just like up and down the coast. Like you could swim out and touch them, not that anyone was, but everyone was standing on the shore just watching these two whales.
Beautiful.
And it was so beautiful. And I just thought, if we could, if like everyone came out, there was news reporters there every day. Kids, people would drive there after work to see the whales. There was drone, it was just like such a big deal. And they were there for like a week, I reckon. I was saying at the time, like the stuff like Scott Reef is this pristine coral atoll with, you know, migrating whales, birds, turtles, sea snakes, all this um, incredible, life. But it's so far away that we can just kind of, out of sight, out of mind it.
Yeah.
But the care that people, placed onto these two whales, which are the same whales that are swimming in around Scott Reef, yeah, it's funny. And I often say about WA, if I lived away for many years, and when you describe Perth, you're like, oh, the most amazing beaches, the forest, the Tingle Forest down south, unbelievable. The coral reef, Ningaloo, whale sharks. Then there's the pinnacles and amazing desert landscapes. It's just incredible. The landscapes, the natural environment is so amazing. But it's that we're just kind of actively decimating with all this
Hmm.
work, and we're not linking the things that we love the most with the
Yeah.
things that we're hurting the most. And that
Yeah.
dissonance is really an interesting one for me.
I like think a lot about, doing this work obviously can be really challenging sometimes. And I, every now and then, like get caught up in, we know why we're doing it, but sometimes I ask the question, like, why am I actually doing it? And I always try and, I feel like what keeps me going is like picturing those, beautiful forests, the whales, the reefs, and thinking about if it's not for us, it's for everything else. And to me, that's like such a good reason to just keep fighting to protect the planet, but for everything else that, we want to do as well. Now, I'm really keen to talk about your experience getting political but not being a politician, because you ran in 2 elections. Have you run in
Yes,
2?
state and federal in Fremantle last year. Yeah.
Yes, amazing. And I was doing my research last night, and I knew you were close, but I didn't realize far out how close you were to winning both times. Like that was crazy.
Yeah,
Anyway,
shocking.
before we get into that, like I feel like there's a lot more people coming out in recent years who are normal people who are getting involved in politics and trying to have a crack. And you strike me as a normal person and not a career politician, obviously. Do you want to talk a bit about like what led you to choosing to become like to run in elections and stand? I had someone say to me recently they couldn't think of anything worse than running in an election and becoming a politician. I thought that was kind of funny because
I mean, that was probably me that said that. What a nightmare. We just want the politicians to do their jobs. Like I don't want to do this. You don't want to be doing this. We want to be traveling around the world and living our lives, you know. We want the people who are elected to be making good decisions with our tax for the good of our country and the good of our people and the good of our planet. And yeah, I don't want to do it, but it's so urgent now. And, you know, people always say, you think the politicians are the smartest people in the room or they're doing the right thing by us. But then the older you get, you think they're not. I think, first of all, everything is political, you know, where you can afford to live, what the path outside your house looks like, if you've got canopy in your city, what your Wi-Fi is like. Everything is political. And once you realize that, you kind of realize everything you do is political. And so I had a small business in Fremantle for the last 13 years. In a way, that's a radical thing to do, having a little business that you work in and you talk to people every day, hundreds of people from all different walks of life, and you start realizing what people are getting annoyed about or what they've got the wrong idea about. I would be speaking to hundreds of customers, you know, over my time, and so frequently people would be like, they should really do something about insert issue, you know, empty shops, no toilets in town, bad public transport, whatever. They should really do something. And I would start saying, who is they? Who are you referring to? Because actually we are they. You know, if we want small businesses, we've got to support them. If we want great arts and culture, we've got to buy tickets to see a gig. We've got to buy local people's artworks. We've got to support the things that we want, and we've got to vote in ways that we believe. So I spent, you know, so many years kind of doing grassroots things like the space activation, which was to try and help small businesses, startups, help young people have a crack at, you know, starting a business. And then year after year, I started realizing that we can scream and shout about stuff. We can go to a protest every weekend, but if there's no political will, and then there was one particular incident in Fremantle, or one particular kind of issue, I guess, that sparked a lot of conversation, which was a new police station that was chosen to be right in the centre of town, right in the entertainment area. Massive, like a casino. Nobody wanted it. The council didn't want it. State government just went, well, cool, that's whatever, we're doing it. We don't give a shit about what any of you want.
So much for democracy.
100%. But we got together at that point. There was like a politics in the pub talking about this issue. And then we were like, we've got to find a new rep, you know, like they're not representing us. Subsequently, I spoke to Richard Dennis from the Australia Institute, and he said,
awesome.
The only thing politicians care about is power. So the only thing that they will react to is their power being threatened. All they want to have is power. They want to be either in Canberra or in the ruling party, and it's got to be one of the two. So he says you've got to threaten their power. That's all they care about. So we started this conversation about like, okay, what do we do? That was probably 18 months before the election. A local community, you know, official voices for Fremantle started up. I was like, great, let me know what I can do to help. Just keep me posted. I can't wait for you to find the dream candidate. And, you know, in my mind, it's like a professional, someone that wears a suit, like a smart woman. A year passes, they're doing all their community listening, talking, door knocking, markets, all this rest. And, long story short, I think it was like the 30th of December or something, I get an email from a stranger. It was an attachment to an email. First of all, red flag, but it said, "Dear Kate, please find attached." And someone told me I was going to get this email. So I opened it up, and it was just a very compelling argument to say, we've got to try something new. I think, from what I understand, you're probably going to be a person will have a chance. Elections are so few and far between. The world's going to hell.
Yeah.
You got to do it. And I was like, oh, no. And I listened to Senator Wish Wilson, and when he told you about the Bernard Keane crikey thing,
Yeah.
and I was like, it's the same. It's like I kind of thought, I can't go to bed at night with this information in my head with a good conscience that we didn't even give it a go. Let's just give it a crack. And this was a state election, so bit different from federal, but it's been a state,
still massive.
It's a Labor seat for 100 years. We've
Yep.
had a Labor landslide in WA for yonks.
Yeah, how many seats do Labor hold in the state in WA? It's like
I mean, that
nearly all of them,
information's
isn't it?
gone from my head. Yeah, basically, it's all Labor, and also it's a really liberal Labor government. Like it's basically liberal. That's why Liberals don't even bother speaking out half the time, because it's like, that's what we would have said.
Getting everything they want anyway.
Yeah, they're like, keep going, guys. You're doing our job. So we gave it a red hot crack. I said, fine, I'll do it on whatever, the 1st of January. We launched the campaign on the 10th of January, and then the election was in March. So it was bonkers.
That's crazy.
Particularly bonkers to have it so close that they had to recount. And every day I was ahead, and the MP was ahead,
Yeah. Well, normally when you're going, running to win, you have so much more time to run a campaign.
Totally.
Not 2 months.
I mean, maybe in hindsight there was a real benefit to that, because we just were like, bang out hard and fast. And, I'd had a shop in Fremantle and done a lot of work in Fremantle for over a decade. So I wasn't an unknown quantity for many people, although, many people would say, no, I'm not going to vote for her because she's not experienced or whatever. But, on reflection, it was like I'd been canvassing for a decade, reverse door knocking. People were coming and knocking on my door, and I'd talk to them,
It's almost better. Like most people already know you from being in the community, not being a politician. Yeah, 100%. Trying to be a politician.
And, the idea of a career politician is so mental to me. Sometimes I say, I reckon people should not go to uni until after they're 25, like go and live your life a little bit and then come back, and then a little bit more about yourself and what maybe you're interested in actually, not just like straight from school. But same with politicians. Imagine if they said you can only run after you're 25 or after you're 30 or something, and you can't just work in an MP's office. That can't be the life, And, the thing with running as an independent is people are voting for you very specifically. They're not voting for, most people would be like, well, I'm voting for Albanese or Dutton anywhere in the country, or I'm voting Greens or Liberal, whatever. Whereas independents like you, very specifically you. As we were running the campaign, it's weird to think that, in Fremantle, we have a Labor state and federal MP. They are representing Labor in Fremantle. So they come and tell Fremantle about Labor. But what we want is our MP to take Fremantle to Canberra or to the state parliament and represent Fremantle. Because it kind of doesn't matter what the Labor seat in, Queensland, that's not the same as the Labor seat in Fremantle. So it's an interesting, when you think about that, actually, community representatives make much more sense. The downside is you don't have the money and all the mechanisms of a party and, all the support of people in head office saying, here's your core flutes and here's your literature and here's your policy we've prepared for you and stuff. Obviously the parties are very different in quality and so on. But the thing with Labor that is most frustrating is that they all have to say the same thing. They all have to say the same lines. And
Yeah.
Every now and then you see someone like, Fatima Payman, who said, you know what, I can't abide by this genocidal regime,
Mm.
gets kicked out. Ed Husick's an interesting one. He's been speaking out about
Yeah.
things like gas recently, which has been fantastic,
Mm.
inspiring, but he's only doing it because he got relegated to
Shafted
the
from the, yeah.
totally.
Yeah. And just on that as well, like I was listening to Patricia Carvelis talking about this a few months ago. Like, it's actually crazy that, yeah, it's like, oh, wow, Ed Husick speaking out about gas, but it is actually crazy that it is a crazy thing to see. Like, that should be so much more normal.
100%.
They're just
Yep.
all towing the party line so much. And that
It's
is obviously why people don't like career politicians, because they all sound exactly
100%.
the same.
And it's not real life, because of course they all disagree with stuff, but the fact that they have to come out and, the Penny Wong example is the classic, whereby she had to vote against gay marriage, even though she's
Yeah.
gay herself. Like, how
Yeah.
detrimental that must be to your soul. And when you go home and talk to your children or your friends and family, I think it must be really difficult for them,
Mm.
and maybe they need to start evolving with the times. I
Yeah.
read that really fantastic Sean Kelly quarterly essay, number 100, and it is called something like "What Does Labor Stand For?" Something like that. And he used to work for the Labor Party, and it's a really interesting look at how the way they behave now in such alignment might be a reflection of what happened with the Gillard Rudd, government, and they need to present themselves as unified and not destabilizing, and everything has to be lined up so that they have the confidence of the people.
Yeah.
But actually, in doing so, they dehumanize the MPs and alienate themselves from communities, which is
Mm.
unhelpful for them. They're kind of shooting themselves in their own feet. Um, I didn't want to do it. I then thought, I've got to do it. There's actually nothing more important now. When you
Mm.
really think about it, it's like we have to make decisions now for, I think about 7 generations ahead. We want to be good ancestors.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's like, because you can get so ambitious and feel like you want to do as much as you can and try and like you set your expectations way too high. But I think it's acknowledging that like it's a relay, maybe. I don't know. Like it's you do a bit, you pass it over to the next person and the next generation. And I also think like, is it easier to think about doing it if you sort of decide like it's not for you, but it's for everyone else, putting your own sort of personal
Yeah,
like things
yeah.
aside.
I've thought about ego so much in the last year. I think since I ran, even dealing with the parties and in different manners, and I was like, we've got to take ourselves out of this and think about the bigger picture. Like, what's our objective? Where do we want to get to? The goal's over there. All right. We've all got to start rowing in the same direction. Let's not fight in the weeds and pull each other down, because the bigger picture is all of us in this, you know, universe, right?
Mm.
It's not about me winning or you winning or whatever. It's about like getting to the goal. And then I start seeing, there's all these organizations and they're all start up and they've got their CEO and their board and da 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 da, an office and stuff. And I think, why do you exist and you exist? Because you're kind of doing this like you guys could work together and have a much better impact.
Yeah.
And then I think, oh, there's a bit of ego in this. Like people want to be the person I resolved that or I solved that or whatever. I think when it comes to like the community movement, I guess it's like I'm just a spokesperson for all these people who wanted to
Mm.
change. So I'm just one of them. I just happen to
Yeah.
have the microphone or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
think
yeah.
that's a good way to look at it as well is, it's not just you. It's not
Oh
just
God,
whoever's
I
putting themselves forward.
totally
And you need
100%
to have, um, charismatic people
endorsement.
who are, what was it?
Totally.
Endorsement?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
you need, I mean, on one hand, I was going to say, like, when we lost, when the numbers came through, like a week, 2 weeks later, whatever it was, I just felt so devastated for all the really old people who were retired. And like, We've got an incredible climate scientist in Fremantle called Bill Hare, who I consulted on with, and Fiona Stanley, the epidemiologist who has a
Yeah.
hospital named after her, done incredible work across the world. Joe Valentine, who started the Greens and is like this amazing anti-nuclear advocate. All these people live in Freo. So I'm talking to them. I felt completely devastated for them that we didn't win. Then I thought about all the little kids that had been like flying for me and like on their mums' backs as they were door knocking. And I thought, I can feel completely devastated for you, like personally gutted that I failed. But I don't know if that's ego or delusions of whatever, grandeur or something. But on one hand, you feel incredibly personally responsible, but on the other hand, you think I'm only doing this because we're desperate for change, and I was selected because I happen to have a shop and people knew my name, whatever. I hate that we're at an era where it has to be like someone that people know or someone that can make a reel or but we are where we are. We have to evolve. Everyone's on their phone. You've got to be on your phone talking to them. We've got this rise of crazy right wing billionaire funded, nuttiness. So we've got to evolve and change and keep trying everything we can. And if this is where we are, great. Okay, we've got to we've got to do it. And the other thing I was thinking before is, for years I've said we need more normal people in government. We need nurses and sparkies, and we just need a representatives of Australia. And if you look at who's in Parliament, they are not representative of Australia. They're representative of, private school, university educated, generally white, wealthy, upper echelons of society. And that's not representative of all of us. And so I'm saying that to people, like, we need more normal people. And isn't it crazy that we say normal people, like politicians aren't normal? That's
Yeah. Yeah.
wrong, But then if I'm very happy to tell other people they should do it, but I'm not. I'm not going to do it. Gross. That's the worst job in the world. I don't want to go to the city every day in an office. Yuck. And I thought, we've we've got control over ourselves and what we do and how we behave and what we say. And I thought, I can't tell other people to do it and not do it myself, or like at least try. And I said to someone yesterday, even running a campaign, and you'll know this from experience, is a win because you're agitating, it's an act of resistance, and
Yeah.
that is a win.
Yeah. Well, that's like some of the things that you said, you felt really disappointed that you lost and you failed. But I don't know, I think it's almost the wrong way to look at it. I feel like it depends what you've got, almost what your goal is. Like if the goal is to win the seat, which it obviously always
Totally.
is or should be, like
100%.
then you didn't win the seat. But I think you probably gave so many people so much hope that they probably didn't have
100%.
beforehand.
Yeah.
That can be built on
Totally.
in the future.
And I mean, I felt that deep disappointment in my own space afterwards, that kind of a deep sorrow for what could have been. But yeah, at the time, and as I spoke about it, and what I could see the change, I could feel the change in the community. That was more than I could ever hope for. And
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to win. Labor are entrenched here.
Yeah.
This is a union town with a working port and well-funded, senior politicians who are our representatives. It was not a thing, like the Greens vote hadn't really changed forever. Although it was progressive, it was like, well, like this is just what it was. And
Yeah.
so it was an enormous win. I guess it's just the closer you get to like going, shit, we could have won. And there's just so much on the line, the Northwest Shelf was about to get announced, the nature positive laws, we've got more people than ever sleeping on our streets. And it's like, God, it's yeah, crazy. It just felt like, on one hand, what's possible. And I think so many people message me like, I've never done anything political in my life, but I, letter dropped 10,000 letters for
Yeah.
you, or I door knocked, or I've never refreshed the AEC website more in my life. I can't believe it. People across the world were like, "Kate, what the hell is happening? I can't believe this." And
Well, you were you were
That's
you were in the lead
yeah.
like
We won on
for
the
a while, weren't
day.
you?
Yeah,
Wow.
we
Wow.
won like yeah for
Like
a
that's
week after. I was like, am I going to be the MP? What the hell am I going to do?
yeah. Were
What's an
you
MP?
Yeah, like that's amazing. Like
Mm,
considering it's been a Labor seat, what,
totally.
almost forever, right? And then you came along in like 5 months or however long it was and nearly
Mm.
upended all of it.
But you know what it showed? If you talk to people and talk to people on their level and, spark something in them, the whole country can change. Like
Yeah.
we just did like we had just over like 7 weeks I think we had in total to run a campaign from
Right.
nothing to winning on the day. Um,
After the state election?
no, that was the state. Federal was 5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Federal was 5 weeks, and I had to relinquish my passport, which didn't happen for 2 weeks. So that by the time it actually happened, pre-polls had opened. Like it was just these mental timescales. So it just shows if you can get a candidate and some policy that connects with your community and you talk to them at their level and inspire them, Jesus Christ, what can we do?
Yeah.
And how terrifying that is for the major parties.
Yeah.
So I know now that they're like gonna, I mean, already I every day I'm getting advertised on Instagram for all Labor politicians,
Mm,
in WA. They are spending so much money trying to influence us already
mm,
because they know what we can do. Because we all have a vote. Woodside doesn't have a vote. Woodside staff have a vote,
mm.
but Woodside staff don't all agree that, yeah, it's fine to blow up the planet.
Yeah.
So we've just got to talk to people. And what's so frustrating to me is like that the right wing are somehow doing such a good job at communicating with people
Mm.
and scooping them up in their nets. And there's something that we need to start, not start, we needed to start 10 years ago. But you see these little sparks like Zoran Mamdani and
Yeah.
Hannah the plumber in the UK and Chloe Swarbrick. There's all these people that are like just sparking something.
Yeah.
And we've got to just build on that, learn
Yeah.
from it, and not pull each other down, keep our eyes on the bigger picture. And I think we can do so much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think the right is doing a really good job at just putting out a simple message. Like it's probably, most of it's just completely ridiculous, obviously.
Nonsense. Total nonsense.
Well,
Yeah.
all of it is.
Yeah.
But it's so
Yeah,
easy to
totally.
understand. And I think that's probably that's how in the federal election, that was probably one of the biggest impacts to our vote was people. I had so many people come up and talk to me. They were just so scared of Dutton winning. So they just wanted to vote Labor because they didn't understand how the preferential system worked.
Oh, totally.
And they were just so they just voted Labor, even though they weren't happy with probably most of the things that they were doing, but they just were too scared of the opposite. And I hope now people realise that it seems like the two-party system is being so close to just being completely upended.
Totally. It's crumbling. It's such a huge, when we finished, I was like, geez, we've got to do like so much civic education. The
Yeah.
preferential, people that were scrutineering for us were like, so many people would put like one Labor to Kate Hulett because they were like, we're going to send Labor a message by putting Kate second. They don't get that message,
That doesn't work.
but they think that, and that, people, I was doing lots of like vox pops in the street with people, and one woman was like, who are you preferencing? I was like, we don't preference. No, but who are you preferencing? And I was like, no, you preference. And she's
Yeah.
like, I know that you preference. Who do you give your votes to? And I was like,
Yeah.
I know I'm not going to win this argument because you're not listening to me, but I don't have, once you put your numbers down, that's what your numbers are.
Yeah.
And she just would not accept that, and I think what a huge benefit that is to the major parties.
Yeah.
It's so deep, all this stuff that kind of, when the Morrison government did the job ready degrees. So they made humanities, arts, critical thinking degrees double the price. So people are, dissuaded from studying those degrees. So then we have less critical thinkers, and then we have less people who are engaging with like that stuff, just going a
Yeah.
little bit below the surface. And then we have, I mean, this is what's happening in America, like quite a poorly educated populace who then just like go, well, yeah, I'm having a shit time, and you said you're going to help me with my shit time, so I'll vote for you. And like we've got to invest time and energy and money and brains into changing that. Helping people have a better future because it's not all of our fault. Since the neoliberal kind of project that started in the 70s and 80s, it's just fucked people across the world. And now people of our age have only lived in that system, so we can't imagine outside of it. And a guy emailed me yesterday, a guy in his late 20s, works in financial services, and asked me what I thought about the changes to capital gains tax and stuff. I was like, first of all, I'm non-elected and I don't have a team and I don't have a wage. So this is my personal opinion. You're just asking a random person in Fremantle.
Yeah.
But, I thought all he knows is having wealth through owning properties or gaining wealth through stocks and shares and assets and portfolios and stuff. But we can't even imagine a system where you just earn enough money to live a nice life, retire, you've got some money. All you need is what you have. You don't need wealth in the bank. You know what I mean? Like, we can't even imagine that life, that kind of small but very happy and enough life, that simplified life, because we've only lived through advertising and like, you need a bigger car, you need a bigger house. What about this? What about that? You should get some new shoes. What about a cool jumper for your hike? But that needs to be a different jumper from the jumper you wear out, So then you're like, oh, I got to get this, I got to get this. And we can't even imagine not having wealth. But if you have a normal job, like 9 to 5, and you're like accumulating, then you work with someone that says, hey, I mean, when I grew up, my neighbors were like, you've got to buy an investment property because that's how it's going to keep you safe when you're older. And everyone where I grew up in the northern suburbs, things like that, like get an investment property, rent it out or Airbnb, whatever. And we've got to unlearn all of that.
Yeah.
And we've got to unlearn it and then believe it's okay for us and believe it's the right thing to do for the next generations. And that's a huge story and a very hard, and no one wants to be the first to do it. Like, oh, okay, I'll simplify my life. I'll get rid of my car and just see if I can use public transport or share a car or, but every time you do something like that, it's a little ripple that's going to touch your neighbor or touch your family or your work colleagues. And then they might go, oh, well, maybe I could do this thing, So it's all meaningful, but societally, there's some fundamental things that are impacting everything, like education and how we incentivize or disincentivize stuff, the tax conditions, the policy arrangements. And, back to what I said at the beginning, so frequently I think, if it's political will, that thing would be changed. Like if we said, all right, no more plastic bottles. Plastic bottles are banned to be sold in Australia. Well, then that's taken out of our hands. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Can you imagine, like, when I grew up, like in the 80s, you couldn't go to IGA or whatever shopping centre and buy bottled water. Just didn't exist. You just drink out the bubbler or the hose out your front, like now there's whole fridges of different types of bottled water, which is just water in a different plastic bottle.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a friend when I moved to London, I wrote a letter to my neighbours, and the letter, this was from 2002, and it says, I know you have a computer, but do you have the internet? You should get it because then we could email each other. And I just thought, can you imagine not having the internet? Like what?
Yeah.
And then there was like internet cafes that you'd go and like log on. And now I'm just like on my phone, 25 hours a day. And that's happened in such a short time. Some people have only known that.
Yeah.
But we forget that we were alive and thriving before that.
That's right. Like that, these massive changes happened so quickly, but we can't imagine doing anything in politics that's going to actually do anything for people because it's just apparently not possible because governments have done the absolute bare minimum for so long.
When you think of someone like Gough Whitlam, he was only in power for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I've got in my link in my bio, I've got the eulogy from his funeral by Noel Pearson, and it just lists some of the stuff that he did. I mean, one of the things that I often talk about is free university. We can't, well, now we're like, well, that's impossible. Money doesn't grow on trees. Are you crazy? And I'm like, you all got it. It was fine for you to have. Like, don't pull the ladder up behind you. But I think about the incrementalism and the I want like in the middle, centrist, not too left, not too right. It's just bullshit,
Yeah.
you know? We don't have time to be pissing about. We are facing ecological, climate, financial collapse. Like we've got horrors ahead of us and we don't really have time. I think talking about how quick the phones and computers have like progressed, we're like battling to save forests and reefs and this and that and like little bits of law here and there. Suddenly, in like 18 months, data centers and AI has just like leapfrogged over everything. And that's going to be like, oh, taking all our power, taking all our water, causing all this like environmental, sound, ecological damage. And we're like still looking over here. And that's just like, oh, oh my God, that's potentially way worse. That's going to supersede everything that we've been working on. And no one's really got to that bit yet. And those billionaire psychopaths are just like, they're buying nuclear power plants. They're building bunkers for themselves. They are deranged and they're basically running the world now through their wealth. And I just think, God, we've got to be fast. They're being fast. We've got to be fast too.
Yeah. It's so tricky, isn't it? Like it's so overwhelming because
Totally.
like sort of end of last year, I started listening to different podcasts about the impact of AI and the consequences and the potential for what can happen. It's like, oh my God, like I've been spending so much of my time thinking about climate and the climate crisis and how bad that is. And then you've got this other thing and all these other things. And politics is like, the federal election, it was like, we're going to wipe 20% off your student debt if we're Labor, or the Liberals are going to give you half the, cut the fuel excise for a few months. Like, but this is like the debate. And it is.
I know, totally.
Yeah.
It's that like they're feeding you crumbs as if it's a full meal and you're like, oh, thank you so much for that extra 20 cents for 3 months. It's pathetic. And, before the election, I would talk to people, and we'd have little meetups and one lady was like, I've got to vote for Labor because they're doing a crosswalk outside of the school and, a kid got hit there. And I was like, that is the bare minimum. That crosswalk should have been there when the school opened. You can't vote for them because of a crosswalk. You should vote them out because there wasn't a crosswalk.
Yeah.
And I saw this woman a little bit later, a few days or whatever, and she was like, I can't stop thinking about that bare minimum. Like we are offered so little that we're like, thank you so, so much. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. But there should be underpasses and overpasses and, like great bike lanes and closed streets in front of schools. And, like that, we should be dramatically different from what we are. And, we've been offered so little, we've expected so little. Our expectations are rock bottom. What they say, democracy thrives with high expectations. And we've had the lowest expectations. So democracy is like not even on the boil. It's just like cold in a pan off in a hob that's
it's
not
just
on.
an illusion, isn't it?
It's all fake. And so then we have these little disruptive incidents of resistance, and then you're like, oh yeah, you're right. I hadn't really, we've been actively disengaged. We've been told, don't worry about it. It's very complicated. We're doing this. Oh, we've got to go slowly so that you wouldn't understand. Da, 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 da. And it's like, what a perfect story for them to do nothing.
Yeah.
And
meanwhile, they're like telling people that they can't do anything. Meanwhile, they're handing billions of dollars to corporations or making, approvals so quickly, or just like giving them free rein to do what they want. Like, the budget night dinner, it was like Albo and Jim Chalmers, and in the middle was the CEO of Westpac or something like that.
It's heartbreaking. I've got a loan, so every flip a month I get another letter going, oh, your repayments have gone up. And I think, well, that's cool for the bank just to get a little bit of extra money from me every month for their profit.
Yeah.
I just think, and then when you see that, I don't know if you saw that graph about the Woolworths and Coles, their
Yeah,
price like collusion, like just. I mean,
crazy.
it's right in front of us,
Yeah.
all this. And I think of all, when I have my business, all the money I put into it, obviously it's my business. I invested, I made the decision, and, I pay the rent, I pay the electricity, the water, I pay for all the stock, I pay for the signage, blah, da, 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 make it nice for customers. And then when you hear about all the mining companies, it's like, well, they won't invest if we don't give them this. And I
Mm.
think, you didn't invest in me.
Mm.
Don't invest. Go elsewhere. Go and find your Australian gas elsewhere. If you're going to you're only investing because you're going to make billions of dollars. You're not doing it out of the good of your heart. But our politicians talk like, oh, thank you so much for investing. But, we are
Yeah.
we are under the resource curse whereby the mining, well, the fossil fuel industry has screwed us for so many reasons, so many layers. We don't have enough people working on, building sites and in town to solve problems that we have because they're all being paid 200 grand to drive a truck back and forward.
Mm.
And who can blame them because they've been told you should buy a property and then you should buy another property and that's how you're going to have wealth. And the most frustrating part is there's so much evidence of it from across the world and, like techniques to support the issues that the resource curse can give a country. And, Norway and their taxes, all this stuff, sovereign wealth. And we haven't done any of them. And so we're seeing all the downsides and very little of the upsides. And, back to our very first conversation, the WA government are basically spokespeople for the mining industry, for the fossil fuel industry. And therefore, the fossil fuel industry are impacting the rest of the country through the West Australian government. And, even we didn't get the 25% gas tax that everybody wanted. And then Albanese said, but we're going to do this 20% domestic gas reservation. In WA, we've had a 15% gas reservation. However, because of all the loopholes and, carve outs for the gas industry, they have only supplied about 8%, even though 15% is legislated. So they've 8%. One of the Woodside projects, Pluto, has only given 2% to Western Australia because they can make far more money selling it offshore. And that's only because the gas industry has so much power over the state government. So now what we're seeing is through the gas industry's spokespeople, the West Australian government, they're going, oh, don't make that 20%, requirement apply to us. We've already got our 15%, but they don't do the 15%. They get away with 8%. So our prices are going up. And West Australia is forecast for a gas shortage because they're not giving us the 15%, even though we're the third biggest exporter of gas in the entire world. It's just, we can see, you and me, just like normal people, can see how crazy that is. And then every front page of the newspapers, because they all own Woodside shares, they're like, this is crazy. Get your hands off WA. And I think, no, you get your hands off our wealth, our gas. When it comes to the gas tax and this 20%, what it means is that many of these projects don't stack up financially. But then that's not a good project. If you can't run a business without all the discounts and subsidies and grants and carve outs from the government, then it's not a good business. Sorry.
Could you imagine?
That's the way it is.
Yeah. Could you imagine if every small business needed subsidies to run?
I had to shut my shop last year because my rent jumped up $20,000. I was paying rent. They said, we've done a rent review. It's now this. And I said, that's nice for you, but I can't afford that. Imagine if I was a mining company and they said, oh, don't worry about that. First of all, we'll give you a discount on your fuel every day, but also we'll just cover your cost of that. Or you can pay that 20 grand back when you start making a profit. And guess what? I've never made a profit in the shop. It's just not equal. We are not being treated with equality or equity. We don't need to be fighting on behalf of the mining corporations. And you see that, people start, because they've been for 40 years, had these mining lines, like, oh, well, it's the backbone of the the economy, isn't it? Oh, they employ so many people, don't they? You know, and it's like, no, 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 none of that's true. We've just had millions of dollars of propaganda put onto us, and then our politicians say the same lines, and then the politicians go and work for the companies, so then they've already made the rules for them.
It's so frustrating. It's like you just wish more people could understand this. You know, like all of the people out there who are like, oh, you know, lazy people. There's so many lazy people on welfare who don't do anything. They're just getting handouts. It's like, what about all the gas companies who are getting huge handouts? All these like corporate handouts.
The bigger bludgeons.
Yeah. Like so much money. Like what is it? Like $19 billion in the budget for fossil fuel subsidies this year? Like,
and
crazy.
it's like, it's money that we can't comprehend. You know, it's like $38,000 a minute or whatever. You know, it's like, oh, that's more than I made last year, you know? And then, oh, another minute. That's a week. That's everything I've made in my entire life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's because all the stories in the press are like someone blooding $200, but you know, there's a company called Mineral Resources, MinRes, and like the CEO was done for, you know, white collar crime, but that's fine. He's a job creator. He's an innovator. He's a, you know, capital ghoul, and people love that because we've been told to love that. It's just the messaging, you know, and you know, most of the gas in Australia is used by the gas plants to do the extraction, like by far.
Yeah.
It's like way more than we use in our businesses and our houses, way more. So they dig it up, put it on a ship that is powered by fossil fuels, goes to another place in the world, gets processed, back on a ship with fossil fuels, comes back, distributed by trucks with fossil fuels, gone underground or, you know, into our homes, used once and it's done. I mean, it's just such an inefficient, crazy use of energy.
There's that really good post that's been circulating for a while. Like if we transitioned the world to 100% renewables, we'd cut half of the ships out because they're just carrying fossil fuels.
Fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Totally. And imagine in Australia, all the trucks going long distance to the petrol station. It's just mental. Imagine if we had a renewable grid in Australia and didn't have to rely on international happenings, and we were a sovereign nation with our own energy security. I mean, it's so possible. It's been just happening across the world.
And
somehow
so much sense.
We're opening new fossil fuel projects. I mean, that's like morally revolting. Like that's why I think, you know, if you're in Labor, you should probably quit because that's a moral failing, actually. Because there's good people. There's good people in politics, you know, there's good people. But if you working from the inside's not working now, that's what your attitude was. Like, well, we've got to have good people in. No, that's not working. We don't have time. Speak up, run for the Greens or as an independent, or go and do something else with your life. Because we don't have time morally and, you know, ecologically. For the future of our world, we don't have time for you to toe the party line if you don't believe in it, you know? And I think people would appreciate people being a bit more honest and active as their representatives.
I think it's so refreshing. Like people feel so refreshed when people like Ed Husick just say, no, I don't agree with what, you know, the party is saying. And it's like, oh my God, this is,
oh my God, a human being.
You sound like a normal person now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what was so disappointing about, I think, the last election as well. You know, there's so many people who I speak to who probably share almost exactly the same values as you and I, who are just still voting Labor because for whatever reason, it's like they've approved over nearly 40 new fossil fuel projects in the last 4 years, like Woodside's Northwest Shelf, the Chevron gas project, like insane. Nature laws, you know, super weak. So it's so disappointing that people are still choosing just the status quo.
And that, like, well, it's better than the alternative because they think, you know, there's only two parties where, of course, there isn't. And we need to, all of us, do a better job. And, you know, unfortunately, the mainstream media is so in the pockets of Liberal and Labor because of the donors and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They've, you know, villainized the Greens. So there's this kind of attitude, you know, some people ideologically are opposed because of what they read. And, just weird stuff like, oh, but what about the inheritance tax? What are you talking about? Like just some random thing that you read once and it's just stuck in your head. So we've just got to keep trying every way we can, every direction. And I think at this point, I hear you talk a lot about male role models, and that's something that is a huge, huge issue. And it's really frustrating because it's really clear to me, I did a lot of work during the Voice referendum, and I was like, it's all women that are talking, around the genocide. It's so frequently women that are speaking out. And it's like men are a bit like nervous to get it wrong. And, as products of a patriarchal system, men are just as impacted as everyone else. But it's like their voice has been taken away because they're afraid to be wrong, and then they don't say anything. And then when we've got volunteer events, when I arrange lots of gatherings, community things, planting, whatever, it's always women that come out, one or two men. So there's enormous power in women, and let's face it, we should be reverting to a matriarchal system. But the problem is men are so disenfranchised. Young guys are just getting fed absolute trash on their phones, and on the other hand, great men are like nervous to speak out, or just like not speaking, or not on Instagram, whatever. They're not on TikTok talking about political stuff. They're talking about the surf or other stuff that's much more interesting that we'd much rather be talking about. So then there's a big void. And so, the likes of you and Clancy and Punters Politics, performing such a huge role. We've just got to have more people like you, like me, just regular folk going, all right, let's give it a crack. Because giving a crack is the win. Getting in is something else entirely.
Totally. That's part of, like, I always think about, I feel like you got to set yourself personal goals. And for me, it's getting more people to care and involved. And I've had a lot of my friends who have told me, like, oh, I hadn't paid any attention to politics until you sort of started talking about it, and now I understand it a lot more. And to me, like, that's a massive win. But I think there's so many things on there. Like, I think, I agree. It seems like women are towing the line on these issues, but the men are the ones in power making the decisions. I also think I wonder if it is because there are so many more women in the space. It seems like women just care more. It's almost like blokes are trying to be too cool, like, oh, it's cooler just to hang out and not care, which I think we need to change.
It's just seeing more people talking about it and doing it and being caring, because it is cool.
Yeah.
And when you see a guy doing something cool, it's like, whoa, that's huge. And it's funny how much more of an impact it has when a young guy is saying something to when a young woman saying something. Like I've got a always was jumper that I always wear around. And sometimes if my partner borrows it and wears it, people are like, great top, mate. And I'm like, I didn't get the great top,
Do you think it's because it's more unexpected to see a guy sort of wearing their values like that?
I think so. And I think, as you pointed out previously, white, straight men are the most powerful people in the world across the universe. So therefore, you have to use your power, because traditionally all we have seen, all the leading roles, all the politicians, all the headmasters for so long have been men. So we've just got to work with that, So if you're a young white guy, particularly, you have an extra burden. And sorry, but you can't look away. And something I was at a talk on last weekend, which included 4 15-year-olds. And one of them said something so beautiful, because they were talking about like community is really important. And one of them said, I actually will say collaboration rather than community, because we talk about nature as something like nature's that, and then there's us. But nature is animals. We're animals. We are nature.
Yeah.
We're not there's no separate, we were born onto a planet that has soil that can grow our food, air that we can breathe, clouds that make rain that we can drink. And we don't need anything else. So he said, it's not community, it's collaboration. We need to collaborate with other people. We need to collaborate with the planet. And I was like, wow, I'm so hopeful for children. My God, he's 15. And he's just like taught me this idea, like community is not enough. It's collaboration with everything around us.
Yeah, I like that. I hate the word environment and nature. It's
I
almost like
know.
do we not have a word to describe nature as we are part of it? I feel like you always have to. Whenever I say nature, I always want to say doesn't really exist. Like we are part of nature, kind of thing. But totally agree. But going back to like what you were talking about before, just quickly about like being in competition with one another and getting ahead rather than like working together. Like it is that neoliberal mindset, isn't it? And it's something, you see it in the right talk about it a lot. And or even Labor like wanting to get ahead. And it's like that idea that we all want to get ahead, don't we? But like actually we should just be able to just we should be able to build
Exist.
this, just exist,
Yeah,
just build this system and society where we don't have to get ahead of anything. We
totally.
have access to everything we need, and it's
Totally.
we can actually live our lives without being stressed about trying to save money and own a house, so when you're 60 you're not going to have to worry. It's like, well, where does your life go
I know.
after that?
I, I mean, even that, the phrase cost of living, like the
Yeah.
cost of being alive. Like there should be no cost to be alive. We, should all have a home. We should all have access to education and healthcare. Like there should be no cost to that. And we
Mm,
pay taxes and collect taxes
mm.
in order to ensure there is no cost to be alive.
Yeah.
We work
Yeah.
and that money comes in and then and it is a total reset to think we have to simplify so much that we don't need massive car loans because
Mm,
we don't need a massive car. We don't need, TV on interest free, whatever, because we don't need another TV in another room. Like
mm,
we don't need all this shit. And there's a lot of work, cultural work to be done
mm.
with that. We consume, I think Australians consume the most clothes in the world, and we just buy and we buy and we buy, and everything's so accessible, and we've got like instant gratification for everything we want. And undoing that mindset is huge.
I think that's something that I struggle with, like, because there's the realm of politics and how we fix these things. But then I feel like there's so much that's like cultural and our mindset and the way we live and the way we think about things that it's almost like it feels like the change we need has to happen in politics, but there's not enough time to talk about everything else. And I think that's why like I really like podcasts, and these conversations are good because we can like talk about like how can we actually live differently that's not just like, oh, we're going to we want free university and we want to like, just those simple one-liners. Like, how can we just like think about life differently? And I saw a really good post yesterday, I think, on tax. It was like someone asking like, oh, you guys who live in, was it Norway or Denmark or something? Like you have some of the highest taxes in the world. Like, how are you happy? And the person replied and said, you're looking at it all wrong. We pay tax so we don't have to pay for everything else. Like you pay, talking about someone in the US, like you pay less tax, but you have to pay for healthcare, education, all this stuff. Like you're just ignoring everything else that our taxes pay for. And
100%.
it's like that collective thinking that we really
Yeah.
need to adopt.
And the right wing are like, that's your money that you deserve, and they've got their hands on your money. But actually, having like great infrastructure, beautiful libraries, free swimming pools, free public transport, free education, free health, all of that stuff takes so much off your mind, and actually that's like life. And it's yeah, cultural. But the thing with culture is it can be changed. Whenever I talk about bike infrastructure, which I'm like, why don't we have the best bike infrastructure in the world? We've got the most sunny days in Australia. People are like, we're not like Amsterdam, we're not like the Netherlands or whatever. But it's like they weren't born on a bike. They were a fossil fuel car centric place. Amsterdam was like choked with cars. And a politician made the decision to change that. And they changed it. And now everyone's like, we're not like them, but why? We're not exceptional. We just have unexceptional leaders who are making,
Yeah.
very cautious, underwhelming decisions. So we can do both, I think. We can mold the culture with strong, compelling leaders telling a compelling story. And then it's not just saying, it's doing, like actions speak louder than words, and we want to feel it as well. I want to feel that my life is better. In WA, we've had like 7 years surplus in our budget. There are more people than ever sleeping on the concrete on our main street here in Fremantle. So it's like there's this dissonance with what they're saying and what we're seeing and feeling. And that's not good enough anymore. You can't trick us. We're not dumb.
Yeah. Like there was once a time where Freo didn't exist as it currently does. Like things
Totally.
change,
Exactly.
just because the world we live in is the way it is
I
now, it
know.
doesn't mean things
And that,
change.
we act like rules are set in stone and written by the gods, and it's
Yeah.
like gravity. But it's like a person wrote that. A person can change that. If it's not working, shit changes fast. We've got to change fast with it. We need to be nimble
Yeah.
and flexible, and we need to evolve with what's right for people and the place and the planet. And we know more now, so we have to reflect our knowledge and our learnings and the
Yeah.
impact that we have individually. And I mean, it's crazy to think that now we're going, so Indigenous people lived here for 60,000 years and everything was fine. We came and fucked it. Okay, let's see what they did. But I was at a retreat recently, and there was people from Torres Strait Islands, Pacific, New Zealand, all Asia, all over. And when people from these First Nations people spoke, they said, I'm from this land and my mother's from this land, and it was a saltwater country, or it was this country. And all the kind of white British origin people were like, I don't really know where. I think my parents were, from there. And like, there's such a disconnect from land and place and being part of nature because we are animals, part of a place. And then I say, oh, that's why we don't care for it. We have zero connection with it. We don't know where we're from or what lands we were from. Like, did we farm? Did we fish? Did we, who are we? What's in our genetics? What's in our DNA? And I've been thinking about it so much, what a difference that makes if we were connected to the place we were in, and when people talk about collapse, I really follow the author Sarah Wilson closely, and she talks, she does an amazing, interviews incredible people. And someone recently was saying, what we've got to do in our local places is know where the fresh water is, and we've got to know where, because if things do go to hell, we're going to need to know where that is. We're going to need to know which neighbours need support, maybe driving around. We're going to need to know who has different skills, which is why we need to build communities and like get really
Yeah.
close,
Yeah.
but really close to the land, and know what's going to grow, what food will grow and stuff like that. And I think that's just an interesting framing, and it's a connection that we just don't have, and we're not encouraged to have, because we see the land, we look at a tree and say, oh, how much toilet paper can we get from that, or matchsticks? But we don't say that tree gives us biodiversity, oxygen. It puts nutrients into the soil, which means it's fertile, which gives us food. We don't look at it for the value it gives us in its state. We look at stuff where it's like, what can we use it for? And then it's gone one time. And I think about that so
Yeah.
much.
And that was a real like concerted effort hundreds of years ago to make people believe that we are separate from nature. Like
Totally.
that's right, isn't it? We like obviously Indigenous communities for a long time, and people as we evolved, like adopted like animist beliefs and different sort of those different connections to not even connection. It's just like there's no, that idea that you're separate from nature doesn't even exist. And then we developed that separation to think that a tree is just something that we can chop down
Wood to burn.
to serve us. I think that's one of the biggest reasons we're in the mess we're in now. But yeah,
100%.
I also try to grapple with the idea of like getting into politics and trying to change the big things. But there's so much need for, collaboration, community, knowing your neighbors, and changing the way we live within our communities. It's like there's the big and then there's the small. And what we have to do over here, if the world, goes to shit and everything, the best way to live, if that happens, is kind of just the best way to live anyway.
Today, yeah.
Today, yeah. And I think it's probably more meaningful as well, then you can sort of see the fruits of your labor. If you're like developing community or, gardening with people,
100%.
you're,
It's in your own back garden, yeah, your own backyard, and you're contributing and you're seeing a difference, and you think, I did that. Politics feels so far away. And when they talk about like a capital gains discount, that makes actually zero difference to me. I don't benefit from that tax, and it's not something that means anything to me, even though it's on the front page of every paper and talked about, ad nauseum. It's like,
Jim Chalmers being a communist.
yeah, oh my God.
Yeah.
But most things in the budget, when they say you're going to get, what is it, $200 in end of 2027 or something, I'm like, great. Thank you so much. That's a huge difference.
Is this the best we can do? Seriously. Yeah.
2 weekends ago, I'd started a town team a while back, and we applied for a grant, got $100,000, which with the council were able to rip up some road and planted 500 native plants. And we put a call out and said, who wants to come and plant? And of course, hundreds of people were like, yes, put us to work. We love this. Kids, grannies, everyone was just there on their hands and knees, like digging in plants right in the middle of Freo.
Yeah.
And, a few weeks before, I'd arranged a little festival, and we had workshops, and one of the workshops was painting little signs that now are banged into the garden that say like, keep out, no pause, whatever, we're growing, all this sort of stuff. And they're little adorable hand-painted signs that kids and grown-ups have painted, which are now there, that people walk past and they see human hands, and they can see the photos of everyone coming out. And that is so meaningful. And that kind of ripple means a lot. And, when people have been kind of disengaged from politics, have also been disempowered. Like people, we're so knotted up. We're really, as individuals, we get really over-regulated. Big corporations, under-regulated. They get away with hell, whereas you and I can barely breathe. If I pull up a brick and put a plant in, I'll probably be thrown in prison. That's how people feel, They're like, we're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to just plant under the trees in the street. We're not allowed. But when we said, hey, we've got permission to come and plant 500 plants, everyone's like, yay. And what I want for all those people to think is, maybe I could do that on my verge at home, or maybe we could get a grant for outside of our school, or maybe we could. And then that starts like influencing people, and then they start talking to their neighbors in real life, maybe having a boisterous conversation in real life and not in the comment section, absolutely hating each other. And then that changes the world, like, oh, my neighbor, he's a bit of a wacko, but he's really nice. He's good at heart, and then you can have nice conversations, and maybe you say, hey, maybe look into this person who's running for council or whatever. I think they might be nice, and we've designed our cities to make us all isolationists, and, as you said, like getting ahead of the other, like, I've got a bigger car and I've got a bigger house. We used to have porches. We used to hang out the front, know our neighbours, keep an eye on the street. Now we drive into our garage, which is joined to a kitchen, and then you spend time in your theatre room, on your phone while the movie's playing. We don't even know our neighbours or people in our street. And then you start becoming defensive, like, who's that over there? And then they're really, and it just becomes this weird, like, why haven't they taken their bin out? And our whole mentality used to be like, oh, I took your bin in because it'd been out overnight. It's just, we've designed out community, we've designed out connection, and look where it's got us. Miserable, lonely, diseases of despair. So if one rebellion you can take is to say hello to your neighbor, smile at people when you walk past them on the street, see if you can do a little rewilding project, all of those things are rebellions, and they're meaningful. They're meaningful as heck, and that's how whole communities change. The rippling of those impacts will change the country, and we must rebel against the loneliness and the isolation and the getting ahead. And it's not a competition, it's collaboration. All of us collaborating with the ocean, collaborating with the forests, collaborating with the desert. It is our responsibility to protect it. We are but caretakers for the next 7 generations. And what we do is in the DNA of the next 7 generations. And so I think people have to start really thinking about that.
Amazing. That's the snippet. That's the headline right there. Yeah, I love that. And I actually like recently I was I was telling Clancy this because he is like advocating a lot about like native gardens and nature strips and all that sort of stuff. Like my neighbors across the road got a council grant
Oh,
to
so good.
dig up their nature strip and plant native plants. And I just I only met them because they were out the front doing that. And I went over and
Totally.
introduced myself. And then, or she might have come over and said hello because I've got like a veggie garden out the front as
Oh,
well. We don't have
cool.
a fence, so that's the thing. It's like I reckon tear down fences, get your gardens out the front, and you start meeting your neighbours. But then I offered to go and help, so I was helping them. Other neighbours were coming out and saying g'day. It's like this like mini revolution is just starting where we're actually
That
meeting our
changes
neighbours
your
again.
street forever.
Yeah,
Like you never will not say hello to them if you pass them now. And that is a permanent change you've just made. And then
yeah,
you might go, let's all meet out the front, bring a chair and a bottle of wine and a bag of chips, and we'll just have a chat in the street.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then you're like, hey, we should have a street party, and everyone brings a lasagna or whatever.
yeah,
And then it's like the neighbors in the next street go, what are they doing? We should do something like that. And
yeah.
then what the hell? You've changed everything.
Totally.
And what did it took having no fence out the front?
Yeah, and the world didn't end because I am in my front yard and everyone who walks past can see me. Like
I know.
so. In addition to meeting your neighbours
Hmm.
and ripping up or planting gardens and getting involved in the community, is there anything else that you would say to people who are like, "Oh my god, the world's fucked"? Like, the world's fucked. What do I do? What can we do?
Recently, I had the deep pleasure of spending time with Christiana Figueres, who was the architect of the Paris Agreement. And she has gone from like, we've got to do this and this certainty of like the targets and, like
Mm,
working towards this to now kind of like accepting that we can't control what everyone's doing, but we can control ourselves. And she said, oh, I can't guarantee, or I can't even begin to tell my grandson what his life might be like, how to prepare him for what's coming. But what I can do for him, and maybe the biggest gift I can give him, is to be happy when I'm around him and to be present when I'm around him. And so when he looks back at our time together, it's like, wow, that woman was happy. She wasn't bitter and twisted. She wasn't like absent. She wasn't on her phone the whole time. She wasn't growing her wealth fund or whatever. She was happy because that will make him demonstrate that behavior as well, which means that you say hello to your neighbor, which means that you put your hand up if someone says, hey, we're doing a community garden in the middle of Frio. It means that you'll go and help pick rubbish up on the beach, whatever. The happiness is something that you can do right now, and you can do that every day in your life. You can demonstrate that and model it. And it costs you nothing, even if it's just smiling. It's something. And on the back of that, thinking about children and young people, and when I don't have kids, so I think about then the people I interact with, people I work with or see in my neighborhood who I know well, they're my family, and I think then I have to model that behavior. But I also last weekend saw Bob Brown talk, who, you know, incredible. And he said, and it's a bit like what we were talking about before, the connecting with nature. Like kids need to know what forests are like. They need to touch the bark. They need to swim in the oceans and have the joy of seeing coral reefs. They need to see the landscapes change. And it is our duty to take them into nature and feel excited by animals and bugs and different plants and not just be on here. Connecting kids to that means they will care for it. And personally, I'm very interested in culture and the arts. And I think what we can do is support the stuff that we love, pay for tickets to see a band, shop at your local shop so that they can pay their bills, buy artwork by people in your area so that you're supporting them to do what they love and to create stuff that actually helps change our lives for the good. All of that stuff is so doable. If you're going out for dinner anyway, just put your money in the business that the money stays in your town rather than that money zooms off to McDonald's HQ. All of that's in our power and it's easy because you're doing it anyway. But there's so many people doing such good work and remembering that there are thousands of brainy, passionate, loving people doing great work in their communities, just look for them and support them. And if, Bob Brown says, if you can't join them, fund them. So donate. If you can't or don't want to chain yourself to a bulldozer, chuck them $50.
Incredible. Well, there's a lot of insight there. You had me captivated too.
I mean, quite random selection. That's like a smorgasbord of random thoughts of mine. So,
well, I think what's really nice is everyone comes at it with a different experience, so has something different to say. Well, thank you so much for having a chat. It's been really nice. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh,
I feel like we could talk for hours and hours.
I could do 8 hours straight, I reckon.
Wow.
Just need a break for a week, that's all.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I'm really bad with that. I've got a really bad bladder, so I can't drink any water. Thanks for listening, folks. If you enjoyed this chat, it would be great if you could leave me a review on whichever podcast app you're listening from. It helps the podcast and it makes me happy. You can stay up to date with Kate on Instagram at @KateHulett_, and you can follow me at Mitch C. Pope. Thanks again and see you soon.